Hi, I'm Jaguar333. In this video I'm going to show you a quick, easy, and reliable way to determine the battle rating of a match in War Thunder Ground Forces Realistic just by looking at the spawn costs of your vehicles when you start a match. Not all players realize that the spawn costs that you have in a match are determined based on your battle rating compared to the battle rating of the match that you're in. So the closer you are to top tier, the higher the spawn costs for your vehicles. The first thing to note to do this is that when you're looking at spawn costs, you have to be looking at a vehicle that is at the maximum BR of your lineup. So if you have a 6.7 lineup, you have to be looking at a vehicle that is 6.7. That's why we're using a German 6.7 lineup here, because they have one vehicle of each vehicle class at 6.7. So in this lineup, we have the Panther II, which is our medium tank. We have a few Tiger IIs, which are our heavy tanks. We have the Ru-251, which is our light tank, and we have the Jagdtiger, which is our tank destroyer, and the Kugelblitz, which is our AA. I also have a bomber, an attacker, and a fighter, just to illustrate how their spawn costs are dependent on the BR as well. So if we look at this first example, right away you'll see that the Tiger II, the Panther II, and the Ru-251 all have the same spawn cost of 100 spawn points. The Jagdtiger is at 90 spawn points and the Kugelblitz is at 70. This is actually a full up tier. So this particular match would be a 6.7 to 7.7 match. Notice that there's also no extra advantage of taking the JPZ over the Jagdtiger. They cost the same, even though one is 6.7 and one is 6.3. That's because we're already at bottom tier, and so there's no extra advantage of going lower than 1.0 BR below the max BR of the match. So while bringing a vehicle of slightly lower BR can give you a slight spawn cost advantage, bringing something much lower, like say a 5.7 into this lineup, would be completely pointless, at least in terms of spawn costs. So let's move on to our next example. This one will be a plus 0.7 BR, whereas the full up tier was a plus 1. Again, we can see that the Panther II, the Tiger II, and the Ru-251 have the same spawn costs, this time at 120 spawn points. We can also see that the Jagdtiger is at 100 and the Kugelblitz is at 90. But notice this time the JPZ with the 0.3 lower BR is at 90, which, remember, was the spawn cost of a fully up-tiered tank destroyer. So this should make it clear that it is not the BR of your lineup that determines your spawn cost, but is the BR of each individual vehicle as relates to the maximum BR of the match. And the maximum benefit is at 1 BR lower than the max BR of the match. Okay, now for our next example. This is a 0.3 up tier, so this would be a 7.0 match for our 6.7s. Here you can finally see a difference between the heavy tank and the light and mediums. The light and mediums are both here at 130, but the heavy tank is now at 140 spawn points. Also, the tank destroyer is at 120, and the AA is at 100. So here we're starting to see a bit of a divergence between the tank lines, but it's still not very much. And the bigger advantage is going down to the tank destroyer or to the AA. So lastly, we'll look at the mythological full down tier. In this case, the heavy tank is at 160 spawn points, while the medium and light are at 150. The tank destroyer is at 130, and the AA is at 110. So you can really see there's been a huge change in the balance of tank RB. In the past, heavy tanks cost between 150 and 220 spawn points to bring in at the beginning of a match. Now it's a range of 100 to 160. That's a huge difference, and there's almost no difference between spawning a heavy tank and spawning a light or medium tank. Also, there's now no advantage to spawning a light tank over a medium tank, at least in terms of spawn costs. Now that we've seen all the different possibilities, I've put this information into a chart, and we can use this chart to determine the BR of a match just by looking at the spawn cost of the vehicles that you have at the beginning of a match. For example, if I had a 4.3 lineup with a Churchill heavy tank, and at the beginning of the match that heavy tank was going to cost 140 spawn points to spawn, then I know I have a plus 0.3 match. That means that match is a 4.7 match. Or if I had a 3.7 Sherman, and that 3.7 Sherman was going to cost 100 spawn points to spawn at the beginning of the match, then I know I'm in a full up tier and that I'm in a 3.7 to 4.7 match. You can use any of the ground vehicles in this chart to determine the BR of your match in the same way. The aircraft are a little bit different because they can be influenced by ordnance options, but I included them in this chart anyway for reference. I've included a link to a Google Doc with this information in the description below. You can find it there. I hope you'll find this information useful and that it'll help you in your matches in the days to come. Take care.